And to start with, our keynote speaker is Ashish Rajan. He's a principal cloud security advocate at Zinc. Ashish has over 13 plus years of experience in cybersecurity industry, with the last 7 focusing primarily helping enterprise with managing security risk at scale in cloud first world, and was the CISO of a global cloud first tech company in his last role. Ashish is also a keynote speaker and host of the wildly popular Cloud Security podcast, a SANS trainer for cloud security, and an outspoken opinion leader on all things cloud security and DevSecOps. He is a frequent contributor on topics related to public cloud transformation, cloud security, DevSecOps, security leadership, future tech, and the associated security challenges for practitioners and CISOs. His title for the talk is It's 223. It's 2023, and there is still no DevSecOps. Please welcome Ashish for his talk for today. Yep.
Amazing. Hi, Ashish.
Hey.
Welcome to DevSecOn.
Hi.
Hi, nice to. Thank you for the intro as well. Hopefully, you can hear me.
Yes, we can
We
hear
can hear
you.
you.
I think the video is a bit slow. I think what I realized. So
Yes.
please ignore the video.
Yes.
As long as
So
you can hear me.
your mouth is not moving.
Yes, I was going to say that.
As long as you can hear me, I think that people can appreciate that, I guess. So this is the joys of working on a crappy internet, I guess, today. But I should make this work. But thank you for
Definitely.
the intro as well, Kavika. Really an honor to be here. I've shared my screen, so if you folks want to share that on the screen as well.
Yes.
Sweet.
I've got your deck live. So me and Kavika will just go over to the background and we'll let you take it away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really freaky for people who watch the video and they're like, why is he saying something else? But we'll make this work. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who's joined. And I appreciate you focusing on my voice rather than my video. So I appreciate you hanging out. And it's an honor to be keynoting the APJ region for DevSecOn Lightning, which is my home region. I'm based out of Melbourne, Australia. And as Kavika mentioned, the talk for today is 2023 and there is still no DevSecOps. So I'm going to go, well, I think, okay, cool. It's still sharing. It's pretty good. So the first, basically, who am I? For folks who don't know who I am, my name is Ashish, and I have been in cybersecurity space for a long time, as was mentioned by Kavika. From an academic perspective, I did a master's in cybersecurity. I was a CISO just before, and for the past 3.5 years, outside of my regular day job, I've also been running a podcast called Cloud Security Podcast, which is ranked top 100 in US, UK, Australia, and I think France as well as of last week. Outside of all of this, I also just happen to love men's fashion, and coffee is my thing. And on the personal note, my dog's right behind me as well. So hopefully he doesn't start barking. That's my fingers crossed for that as well. So good luck with my talk. All right. So for this keynote, what I had in mind was to explain to people, I guess, after running, DevSecOps has been a concept since 2009. For people who have been there in the beginning, I used to run a DevSecOps Melbourne meetup, which we still do. And the idea behind that was, hey, give it another 3-4 years and everyone would have the answer for it. It's like going out to the gym to work out and expecting you'll have abs at the end of 6 months. How many of us, I'm sure some of you did, but not everyone got abs straight after the 6 months of workout. I think DevSecOps kind of became like a similar thing where it got muddied in the different definitions that existed. There are roles for DevSecOps that exist in most organizations these days. For people who don't know this, but DevSecOps is supposed to be a framework where it's a way of working where development as well as the operations team can work together. But it wasn't supposed to be like a DevSecOps engineer or a DevSecOps consultant. But humans being humans, we figured out a way to, I guess, ruin something, for lack of a better word. And as was mentioned earlier, that I am a bit brutally honest about most topics. So you might find that my definition of DevSecOps is almost a bit more purist, but it is kind of what the idea was. It's a framework defined for how can we work together as a community of developers and operations. And kind of including security in there became the whole DevSecOps model. Now, I've already called out the fact that the biggest advantage for folks who have been in the industry for a long time, kind of like myself, or maybe even longer, you would remember waterfall method and how we would wait 6 months or maybe 1 year sometimes for a project to finish before we even know that, hey, are we building the right thing? And is that still relevant? DevSecOps was that answer to, hey, how can we get quicker feedback loop for if I made something for an entire month, the entire shareholder that are responsible for funding the project, are they happy with where the project is going? Or are they even happy with the direction that we're going in? That was kind of the motivation for it. Some of the components that people would hear about, and if this is the first time you're hearing about DevSecOps, I'll definitely encourage you to Google these acronyms that I call out. CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, agile practices, which is your successor to waterfall methodology, and basically AppSec checkpoints like your SAST, DAST, SCA, and the whole secret management, and the list goes on. That was kind of like the main foundational pieces for what DevSecOps is supposed to be in terms of holistically. Again, this is a 10,000 feet picture, but you can go deep dive into some of these as well. Now, the next slide I wanted to kind of call out is for 2023, and we still have a vision for why haven't we done DevSecOps so far? Why are we still stuck with a DevSecOps consultant or a DevSecOps engineer role? What's stopping some of these? Now, if you were to just go on the internet and just Google for, hey, what do I look for when I do DevSecOps? You get these beautiful pictures where it looks almost, I love the one on the right, where it's almost like a straight path. You start with the planning, you go into the code phase, you build it, and by the time you get to deploy and you operate it, you're looking at something which is fairly straightforward, right? Even the one on the left-hand side as well looks like a very fairly straightforward drive, where you have the DevOps component and you're doing continuous delivery, you're using agile methodology to create beautiful products that have been tightly feedback looped and everything. Now, if you go a bit deeper and try and find out what kind of tooling you can use for this as well, engineer will tell you that, hey, each one of these components, you can have some of these things in there. You can have all these tools that you can actually work with. Now, this is what the internet is saying. Now, let me show you what the reality of working in DevSecOps is. If you are someone who's tried doing DevSecOps in an organization, you probably would realize this is the harsh reality of doing DevSecOps in most organizations, where each component of our software development lifecycle these days is filled with multitude of languages, multitude of tools, multitude of different opinions of people who want to work DevSecOps, who don't want to work DevSecOps. We also have the challenge of whether the business is ready to fund the DevSecOps exercise as well, because it is not as straightforward as, oh, Ashish is just going to do his job and it would all work out. Or someone else, or the CISO, she's going to try and figure out how can I implement this and it would just happen. There is a cost implementation on both the security side as well as the development side, because someone on the other end has to spend some time on this as well, which is away from their regular day job. And then you can go into the question of, well, if I'm just going to use the two ladies who were there on the call earlier, if Kavika and Shilpi are the developers and they on a day-to-day basis develop amazing products, but I'm going in as a CISO and asking them, hey, we want to do DevSecOps. Can you leave what you're doing and do DevSecOps? And I'll give you Sneak as a tool, and you can integrate that to GitHub, and it'll all work out. You can imagine for folks who are already in a workforce, your day-to-day is pretty busy already. And if you are trying to add more work to people, they would try and resist the need to do extra work. And not because they don't want to, or not that because they don't care about security, but from a simple component of the fact that there's just not enough time. Which means someone on the development side has to either lose money by asking Shilpi and Kavika to not work on the product and do the security thing. So someone is paying somewhere, or some money is being lost somewhere. Now that's the people process side. The other side is from a tooling perspective. Most organizations that are probably in this industry for a long time, if you have been in IT for over 50 years, you have some legacy code. By legacy code, what I mean is languages that are really old and obsolete. I'm thinking PHP. Some people were writing codes in Perl, which is still fairly new, but people were writing in Java. There are a lot of these components which is what makes your product. And what we end up with is, in an organization, sometimes the application that you are thinking of I guess, quote unquote, DevSecOps spying, is that, if that could be a word. If you're trying to do a DevSecOps in any application using that framework to build the two builds together, you might realize that DevOps is not really a thing because it's a really old application. You can't automate, you can't get feedback loops. You have to basically use a traditional way of knowing exactly what you're putting in. Now, that's the reality of a lot of the components that are going in there, which kind of brings me to, I guess, as a CISO, I had a personal experience where I tried doing DevSecOps in an organization and I failed. And I feel this is a safe space to talk about it. So I'm going to kind of list out some of the things that I found. Well, maybe let me start with my personal experience, and then I can talk about why other CISOs that I've spoken to talk about why DevSecOps fails. So for me personally, we didn't have a resource in the team for doing, I guess, just someone who understands application security. Because when you do DevSecOps, whatever component you take for your application security checkpoint, unless you're starting with the security champions first, you probably need a technical person in the team who has been a developer in the past, who understands the developer workflow and can work with the developers to understand how can you work a DevSecOps solution that would fit in really nicely into what they're doing. Like, for example, you may use Sneak as a product for your SCA, which is software composition analysis, or maybe even for static code analysis. And you may buy the component for GitHub. You might just say, oh, I just need GitHub. I don't need anything else. I'm not sure if that's how Sneak works, but if that's how it was working, and you assume that, oh, I need GitHub and I'll get Sneak for my AppSec component, and that would be it. What you realize once you start working is that, oh, actually, my team does not even use GitHub. They use GitLab, or they use this is a great example. What if they use Fabricator? For people who haven't heard of Fabricator, Fabricator was a self-hosted, I guess, predecessor of GitHub, GitLab, from all the modern era it used to be. People are using Fabricator still in a lot of organizations. I think I was at AWS reInvent last week, and I met someone who's still using Fabricator as well. So it is still very much a thing, and it is self-hosted. So there is no, I'm going to go on a URL on the internet, I'm going to find it and be able to work with it. So to some of the tools that you might find for your application security pieces may not even work. So things like that, and you make those mistakes and you realize, oh wait, I got the right component, or maybe I asked the right questions, but I didn't understand how would a developer use it. So there was no integration. Now, I obviously learned from that, and the next time around I gave DevSecOps a shot. I made sure I had an application security person in the team. May not be the most experienced person that have been there, but I think the intent was to have someone in there who can learn as they go in the job as well. And the developers are generally friendly people as well, similar to security. So they should be able to help learn, I guess, teach each other. One person can teach security to the other person, and the other person can talk about the development workflow. But you kind of need to have that kind of a open mind to be able to go into a conversation with the understanding that, hey, I'm here to learn, and I just want to make sure that I'm able to make the most of this as well. Now, the next component, probably a very commonly asked question by people is, hey, what are some of the other reasons? I've shared my own experience. Talking to some of the other people, what I realized was sometimes it's just as simple as the organization does not want to do it. So there would not be any funding available. If you're trying to run a security champions program, to have a successful champions program, you need to be able to, get the right stakeholders from the development side. Going back to the examples that I said earlier, the manager of Kavika and Shilpi, who are the two developers, I need to be able to convince the manager that, hey, I need two of your awesome people to come and work on the DevSecOps side. I'm going to provide them training, and we're going to have this amazing time because we would be able to do DevSecOps, and we'll be able to go more frequently into production in a secure way. Sometimes it's just that you don't really have an organization that is ready for doing DevSecOps. So no matter how hard you try as a CISO, it doesn't work. Sometimes it's organizational culture. Not having a open mind around the fact that you would have to do a lot of collaboration, and having an organization where the development team feels it's okay for them to reach out to security for a mistake or for a fact that I'm not sure what do I do for this from a security perspective. Can you help me? Like not having some of those organizational, cultural elements in the organization is an absolute, I guess, absolute show way of failing DevSecOps as well. Now, I spoke about the benefits and I spoke about other things as well, but another CISO, I guess, challenge that I see sometimes. Now, there are technical CISOs, there are leadership CISOs, and there are non-technical CISOs as well. I personally classify myself as a CISO who's technical with some leadership capabilities, but some of them are pure leaders and make sense for the large organizations that they work for. Now, some leaders, some CISOs may not be technical. The challenge over there becomes that they would say, listen to a conversation about DevSecOps without understanding the technical details of it. And not just because they don't want to learn, but they normally don't have enough time to kind of work on that as well. So you might find that there is no clear understanding of what the objective for DevSecOps should be. By objective, what I mean is, hey, we should at least have one application working with using DevSecOps principles by the end of the quarter or by the end of the year. That is a great objective if you are working in a really complex environment. Now, what that would look like, the details of it, that's all tactical, but having just one objective, a lot of people just go, I'm going to do DevSecOps, I'm going to hire a DevSecOps engineer. Because clearly people apply for the job as well, and it seems to be a thing. Now, the place where it gets confusing is like when a DevSecOps engineer is being asked to not do DevSecOps thing, but more asked to do like different infrastructure things, which is kind of weird, but I'll let that be a conversation for another time. Now, the other part where as a CISO, some people fail is sometimes in an organization, you have to convey the importance of working on any particular security risk based on the matrix of the organization. By matrix, what I mean is every organization would have a risk matrix. They would say that, oh, if I were to be hacked by a hacker, that is a very high risk. But if I was to have a storage volume somewhere in my AWS account, which is my Amazon Web Service cloud account, and for whatever reason that was unencrypted, but it's in a really private location, that's a very low risk. And people may have low, high, so low, medium, high, very high. It may change, and the name may change for different organizations, but that's kind of how people measure whether they should give importance to it or not. Now, from a DevSecOps perspective, if your communication is not well executed, you might find there might be organizations where you're having conversations where it doesn't translate well. People don't understand the risk behind introducing security bugs in production instead of fixing them in the beginning, which is the whole shift left movement people hear about and talk about. Now, that's kind of where most of the conversation would just land on, and unclear communication is probably the most important thing people will think about as they kind of go through the component of it. Now, moving on to the next part as well, where I'm going to move to the slide. Oh yeah, sorry. Just one more component that I want to talk about is the success matrix, as well as calling out the fact that even though you're working towards a security compliance kind of framework, DevSecOps is not a compliance governance framework. DevSecOps is separate. You may have applications that are required to be compliant, but that doesn't mean they are also they are the component that you need to be required. Just realized my cam's not working. I'm gonna try and work that up. Doesn't gonna come up. So I'm just gonna keep working through this. Cool. As long as you folks can hear me. All right. So the next thing that I want to call out is, just finishing up, that DevSecOps is not a governance compliance framework. If you are required to do a governance compliance framework, you probably should look at whatever's required from the industry standard. DevSecOps is just to enable you to integrate security into your already existing DevOps, people, process, and technology. Now, let's talk about why teams fail. Now, we spoke about the leadership level. Having done that in the past, I was able to share that. I can probably bring some of the failures we had based on the first failed DevSecOps project that I had. There was a lack of leadership support, which I mentioned, where if I were to go back to the managers or the developers that I have to work with, if I can't get their support for allowing their developers to spend time on this, then it's a fail to begin with. Like, there is no amount of work you can do to enable DevSecOps. And poorly defined policies, procedures, means that if you are allowing people to have, say, I'll just say, allow them to have leverage to the fact that, oh yeah, you can do DevSecOps, but we only do one component, so don't worry about the rest. Or we have a strict policy that we should have everything encrypted. Now that's a great test to be included in DevSecOps, but the component being, the component being, it should be automated. It's a great process to have, but some people may or may not choose to put that in. So they might make a really complex policy on trying to automate that instead of trying to work through some of the low-hanging fruits in the beginning. The other part is, as a CISO, you may be communicating with the leaders, but as someone who's in the team, your responsibility would be to work with the developers themselves directly. If you don't communicate and clearly state out the goal of what you would like to achieve from a DevSecOps perspective, not giving a clear picture leaves them confused. And after the first meeting, you would find they might not come to any more of your Security Champions program catch-ups or lunch and learns. Talking about lunch and learns as well, having an effective Security Champions program requires you to be at least well aware in how you are going to solve the integration of security as well as the development team in your organization, which requires you to understand the DevOps, the developer workflow. Now, as you go through this, I would also encourage you to kind of think about, hey, now that you thought about this in a different way, what can you do to, I guess, make this better? Last but not least is the fact that once you have deployed all of this, even though you have, say, the right communication, you've done the DevSecOps right way, you're not trying to have any kind of feedback loop. By feedback loop, what I mean is you've made up a program, you've told Ashish, hey, Ashish, you're amazing, you're a Security Champions program member, and we're really proud of you, blah, blah, blah. You do a great job. Now, if you just drop the ball there and don't do any work with Ashish after that and just hope that Ashish would come back to you, that's not how relationships work. Security Champion program is also almost like building a community of security friendlies in an organization. So you have to work with them on a consistent basis. Now, whether sometimes it's literally just having a non-work conversation over a Zoom or a Google Talk or whatever online medium you use to communicate with person, or in-person conversation, but it's all about consistently building the rapport and relationship with all the security champions that you are going to work with on an ongoing basis to know when and how they need some help. Sometimes it's as simple as that. You're just not communicating enough, so they don't feel excited about it. And I think you would be able to come back to the rest of the bullet points as well. But in the interest of time, I'll let you kind of catch up on that. But I wanted to talk about this. So I spoke about the fact that, hey, we know why we are failing. And I for people who've been using the ChatOps thing, which is an open AI component, which is basically using artificial intelligence. I did this thing yesterday where I asked the open AI artificial intelligence, what are some of the things required for DevSecOps? And I think it's a really short video, but you'll find that artificial intelligence have figured out a way to do this. And if I can play, oops, sorry, there you go. That should work. And play. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna move. Come back. This is what happens when you're trying to do a demo in a live. That should work. I'll be patient. Yep, it's working. Hopefully it loads up for you folks as well. Okay, I think it's going to take some time. But essentially, the idea was over there, most of the lists that I called out from a CISO perspective, as well as for it's literally supposed to be a video. I'm surprised. I'll share a link with the video later on. But the idea behind this is that, hey, we should be able to use most of the conversation that I'm going to copy the link and maybe someone can paste it into the comment section. So that you can just go back to and have a look at it. Basically, it's a video of how, yeah, I say, well, I'm just going to move on. But essentially, I asked a question to the AI, why or what do I need to be having DevSecOps implemented in an organization, it gave me a list of 20 things, which is quite surprising. And a lot of them actually match to my 2 previous slides that I have. So I was like, wow, it can do a great job. But the crux of this is, I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning. It is similar to working out and feeling healthy and just being better in life about your own health. The same way is DevSecOps as well, where all of us know, kind of like going to the gym, how can we get good abs and how can we look really fit if we eat right, sleep enough, and I guess maybe drink enough water as well. Everyone knows what the basic foundational requirement for having a fit body is, but how many of us are actually having a fit body? And not like me, I guess. But I think I definitely find that DevSecOps is very similar. But instead of calling it a failure on an individual, I think it's a failure from a cultural perspective. By that, what I mean is, if there is no leadership support for what should be the case in terms of, I don't have a buy-in from my development stakeholders, if I don't have a buy-in from my senior leadership, my CEO, my CTO, if there is no empathy of understanding what the challenges of a developer are to basically implement a small change and asking them to do security things without understanding that, hey, they actually have a whole full 9 to 5. Even though my role may say I'm a DevSecOps engineer, doesn't really mean the development person out there is sitting just not doing anything, waiting for us to come back to them. The other one, the last two probably are the more important ones, where assuming that you can have DevSecOps without an open-minded security team. Traditionally, security teams have been called the no team, just because a lot of times, in a lot of occasions, people were finding that, DevSecOps, the security organization, is not even open to the idea of working with the development team, because it's okay to not know all the answers, and it's okay to be, I guess, learning new things with your colleagues in the organization. So it's okay to be humble about it. The last one, without an organizational culture change, that is not going to happen. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about. But what I want to leave you is with a question. What are you going to change? What are you going to change about your culture today? That's my question for you as you kind of go back from this. The one question that I care about, and I hope you care about as well, if you have a great culture, you should be able to go in and implement DevSecOps the right way. But otherwise, that's the link to the Cloud Security podcast as well. We talk about DevSecOps and cloud security as well. If you have any questions or any comments, feel free to drop them in. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them as well. But otherwise, happy to come back to you folks.
Unmute. Thank you so much for that, Ashish. That was really, really a good way to kick off DevSecOps, and it fitted in quite well with what Kavika and I were actually talking about at the beginning, that, how DevSecOps is, even though it's been around for a while, different places are implementing it differently, and it's good to see you back on the screen as well.
I was like, this took the entire screen. It's like entire presentation is over. Now the camera comes on. Like, perfect.
Yes, that's just the way it works. You just wanted people to focus on the presentation and not on your gorgeous beard, I guess. So I think we'll just
use
that as an excuse.
You just realized I spoke about it.
Yes, so we always love some pets and kids on the stream are a must. I think it was really interesting for me, the whole thing about DevSecOps being a culture thing and not an individual thing. That is so, so true. I think that's something that, we can definitely walk away with. We did actually have a question for you. So it's come from Kavita, who was joining us on Hopins, and she's asked, whose responsibility is DevSecOps in a large organization? So is it the CIO or the CISO? So I think that's a great question. Thanks, Kavita. And would love to get your thoughts on that, Ashish.
Yep. I think I'll probably go back to the organization as a whole is responsible for security. The example that I'll give is, and most people are talking about this already, where the Uber example, where Uber CISO was prosecuted and potentially is going to be jailed as well. What that has meant is a lot of CISOs are actually calling out. Like earlier, we would just say it online, kind of online forum, and say, yeah, it's a responsible for the entire organization. Now it's not just the organization, but also the board that is responsible for say funding the company, that they're the ones responsible for looking at how, what's the next round of funding going to be. So the board is responsible, the organization is also responsible. So I'll probably say we have responsibility as security people to convey that there's a better way to do security in the organization, but that we are a guidance tool. We are not the implementer, because our job is to support the CIO or the CTO to do better, make faster products, and always be ahead of competition. It's a responsibility of the board, the CEO, and the CTO to know that we, or at least based on the information that we have given them, if we have given them enough information to make the right choice, which hopefully is to go down the path of DevSecOps. So I'll probably say the responsibility ultimately goes all the way up in the chain. But if we are a small organization, most likely it's with the CISO to explain it the right way to the CTO. So ultimately, the CTO is responsible for it.
Perfect. No, thank you for that. And Kavita, hopefully that answers your question. Thank you. That is a good question. And, it's always the question for cybersecurity, who is actually responsible. And, we often talk about shared responsibility and everyone being responsible for security. But, when things become a legal issue, it's always good to have some clarity on that as well. Thank you, Ashish. That was a really good talk and a great way to kick things off.